Good morning. My name's Dave Ovell, and I am serving as lead pastor here at Hillside Wesleyan Church, and I am thrilled to death to be here and excited. So it's been fun. It's been a process. But it's good to be here. But before we dive in for today, it is Communion Sunday. So I don't know if they're ready right now, but if you did not get communion and you want to take communion at the end of the service, if you just want to raise your hand and we'll make sure you get some elements for that. Just don't want people left out. So she's in the back right now. She'll get up here to you guys. But while you're doing that, go ahead, keep your hands up. Here she comes. All right. So, just really so excited to be here. Happy to be here. The Ovells are still slightly in limbo. Right now we're at the parsonage while we're waiting for our house to close later this month. So we're kind of moved, right? So not completely. We came down, last Thursday, I think it was, and it was myself, my wife, my two daughters, and we knew, okay, we're going to be in the parsonage for maybe a month or so. So let's bring as many clothes as we can. But also, what clothes do we bring? Like, okay, it's end of September, beginning of October. Who knew it'd be 80 degrees? But it was an interesting process, and this is way more than you need to know, but I'm going to share it because it's fun. So we're thinking 4 of us, clothes and some other things that we need to have for a few weeks in one vehicle. How are we going to do this? So we came up with the plan. We shoved a bunch of clothes into a garbage bag, grabbed our vacuum cleaner, sucked all the air out of it, and all the clothes shrunk magically. It was awesome. We vacuum sealed all of our clothes, all of our blankets, tied it in a knot, threw them in there. People probably had all sorts of thoughts as they saw us going down the highway with stacks of garbage bags in the back of our vehicle. But we were kind of nervous that they would all pop open on the way. And all of a sudden, boom, there goes a sock flying by me or something. Right, but so we're partially moved in, all that, but we are really thrilled to be here and excited to be here. And you folks have been doing an amazing job of making us feel welcome and really getting to know the Cedar Rapids area. And I am thrilled to death that I am now consistently calling it Cedar Rapids instead of Cedar Springs or Rapid City, or any of those that I, at the beginning, for some reason, could not wrap my brain around Cedar Rapids. But we're there now. In fact, we got to see the farmer's market yesterday. There was the Crunchberry Run or whatever, so got to see a bunch of oddly colored people walking around the farmer's market. That was great. But, so here we are. And James, A Brother's Letter. That is the series that we were supposed to start today. And I say we were supposed to because we're actually going to push it down a week, and I'll figure that out. Because this doesn't happen often, but from time to time, I'll have all these plans and I'll have a message prepared, and then God taps me on the shoulder and says, yeah, nice try. We're going to go somewhere else with this today. So made it super easy for the folks in the sound booth because now they don't have to worry about any slides. And so this is what you're going to get for the remainder of this message. But I really, as I was preparing, it kept coming back to me that this was Communion Sunday. And I wanted to just pause, and I really felt God saying, okay, no, don't go into James yet. Let's rest here for a while. Because I want to share from my heart today a little bit about communion, a little bit about the situation we're in. I'm the new guy. I'm the new senior pastor. You guys clap. I mean, last week I got a standing ovation. It was fantastic. It was wonderful. But here I want to address the elephant in the room as well. everybody's happy with me right now. Because some of you, most of you, if not all of you, are thinking there are changes that need to take place. And this guy, he's going to make the changes the way I want them made. And here's the deal. If I made all the changes that everyone in this room wants made in the way that they want them, we would be nowhere, because not everyone in this room probably agrees with all the changes that need to take place. So I want to share with you where I'm coming from and where changes will take place and why. Yes, there will be changes. But as we make those changes, it's going to be because myself and the board and the staff and all of you are in prayer about those changes. And that we will begin to make changes as God directs. Now, just because you're praying for changes doesn't mean the change is going to happen the way you want that change to take place. I am going to, as the lead pastor of Hillside Wesleyan, do my best to continuously go to God in prayer and spend time with Him in prayer before making any changes. And when changes are made, I want you to know, and I need you to trust, that the changes are not going to be made on a whim, that they're not going to happen just because of convenience or preference. But whatever changes take place are going to be because I really am feeling God's leading in one direction or another. And so that may make some of you very happy on some of the changes, and you may think, he is the best pastor ever. And then the next change that we introduce, you might go, he just dropped in the polls dramatically. Right? But please hear me. Please hear my heart. Again, there are going to be changes because I feel like this is the direction God is wanting us to go, or that God is needing us to go. And, you know, I've heard the last two messages. I heard Rich's last message and then Tim last week. And, you know, they're kind of the preparatory, hey, the new guys come in, kind of getting everybody ready for that. And yes, we're in a new stage. And as we're entering this era of, okay, yep, something new is taking place, Hillside has a huge tradition as well in history. And there are great moments throughout the history of Hillside Wesleyan. And sometimes it can be easy for us to look at our history and go, okay, all we need to do is a few tweaks and then we can keep moving. And we almost start to think, let's get back to the glory days of how it used to be and things like that. And so we're just looking for a tweak here or there. Well, I want to, since I'm coming from the Green Bay area, quote Vince Lombardi. Yeah, some of you are like, yeah. Okay, Bears fan? No. Yeah, right now you're thinking blasphemy. Oh, I can't believe he's mentioning that name from that stage, right? That's okay. I'm a Steelers fan. It's going to be a long day for me today. But I want to quote Vince Lombardi because Vince Lombardi in 1961, training camp is about ready to begin. The Packers, the previous season, went to the championship game. They were in the lead. They were winning the game. They should have won the game, and they lost the championship game. A bunch of veterans coming back, basically the same football team coming back to training camp the next year, just a few months after that game, thinking we were almost there. We were in the championship game. We almost won that. All we need to do is just make some small adjustments to make sure we win. And Vince Lombardi gets in front of these professional veteran football players, reaches down, grabs a pigskin, holds it up, and says, gentlemen, this is a football. We're getting back to the basics. And so I want to say today, Hillside Wesleyan, pretend it's there, is a football. And I want us to focus on the basics. And so for us, instead of a football, Hillside Wesleyan, it's all about Jesus. It's all about his life, his birth, his life, his death, and his resurrection. And if we can focus on that, and if we can make that the center of what we want to reach out to the community with, if we can make that the focal point, the foundation that we build this church on, if we can really, really keep that as the pillar, as the bedrock, preferences and ideas that we have that maybe aren't realized, all of a sudden they don't matter as much. Churches split over carpet coloring. It's ridiculous, right? Let's focus our bedrock, our foundation on Jesus Christ, on God, and make that where we start all of our conversations with. Where we look at each other and we say, how is your relationship with Jesus? Not in an accusing way, but in a real, truly concerned way of, man, I want each and every one of you to have the strongest, healthiest relationship you can with our Father, with our Savior, as you possibly can. And if that means from time to time me coming up and just checking and saying, how are you doing spiritually? That's what we need to do, because that's what's important. That's what we need to focus on. And here it is. It's Communion Sunday. Communion. Community. Think about communion. It has its start from that event we call the Last Supper. Jesus is there, and he's in the upper room with his disciples. And they think they're going to have Passover. In fact, my guess is there were probably a few of them going, oh, I hope he says it this way or that way. I hope we do this, Yes, it's tradition, and you were to go about it in certain ways, different food at different points, but I'm sure there were different spins on it. And Jesus changes everything about that meal. And he starts what we call communion or the Lord's Supper, Eucharist, whatever tradition you come from. And it's very interesting, and we're going to be taking communion here in a little bit, but as Jesus is preparing his disciples for communion, he uses a word that I don't think we totally grasp here in our Western culture. He takes the bread and he breaks it and says, this is his body. Eat this, do this in remembrance of me. Takes the cup. This is the blood. Drink this in remembrance of me. Remembrance. Now, for us, when we remember something, when we remember an event, say you go on a vacation. Now, it used to be you go on vacation, you take your camera, you take a bunch of pictures, you hope they turned out, because they were on this thing called film, right? And you didn't get to take a picture and go, oh, wait, hang on, that's no good, let's take another one. You just took a picture and you went, hope that worked. And then you get home, you go to the drugstore or whatever, throw your film in that paper envelope and drop it in, and a few days later, you got it back until, whoa, fancy smancy, we got the 1 hour photo developing all of a sudden, right? And then you got the pictures and you got to start looking through, and you're like, oh, that one's blurry, oh, this one. Now, my grandmother, she had this great knack of when she was taking pictures. You wanted to make sure your shoes looked nice, because that was really going to be the focal point on most all her pictures. You know, you needed to remember what shirts you were wearing, because there were no heads with a lot of my grandmother's pictures. Right? And so for us, remembering something now is going through your phone and checking out pictures and things like that. Now, in that culture, remembering was something deeper. It wasn't just a, hey, remember this event. You know, hey, in a year or two, Facebook's going to throw a picture up and say, oh, hey, happened 2 years ago. No, remembrance was much deeper. When they were asked to remember something, for example, when the children of Israel were asked to remember the 40 years in the wilderness, years and years later, when they're asked to remember that event, none of them were there. But when they were asked to remember those 40 years, what they were meant to do was to almost take yourself, place yourself in that part of history, and make yourself part of that. To experience it. To understand that this event that took place that you weren't physically part of has shaped you, because it's part of your history. And so you're to remember it as if it's actually happened to you, that you were a part of it. You were supposed to, in imagining it, you were supposed to immerse yourself and see yourself there, as if you could truly smell the smells. You could taste the tastes. So now, fast forward to Jesus in the upper room, and he's telling his disciples and us, do this in remembrance of me. See, when we take communion, we're not taking communion just in 2021. Jesus is saying, picture yourself with me in this upper room. You are here. Picture Jesus as he looks around that table of his disciples and makes eye contact with them and saying, do this in remembrance of me. He's making eye contact with you. And here's where it gets super powerful. We are so timeline removed from Jesus' death and resurrection. It can very easily for us become a moment of history that's almost the same as for today's generation Pearl Harbor is. It's an event we know about. It's an event that's been talked about, and for this event, there's actually pictures. Or for even today's generation, 9/11. They weren't here for that. So it's just a date, an event, a tragedy that took place. Well, for us, even as Christians, sometimes I think Jesus' life and death and resurrection can become just an event in history that we talk about, instead of Jesus saying, think about this, he's at the Last Supper, he's at the table, and he's saying, do this in remembrance of me, and knowing exactly what he's about to experience, knowing about what's exactly going to happen in just a little bit. He knows the most significant event of time in history is about to take place, and he's saying, do this in remembrance of me. Remember this, gentlemen. Remember this, disciples. Remember this, sisters. Remember this. This is significant, and in remembrance, don't just remember the facts. Don't remember just the details. Put yourself there. Put yourselves there. Now, if we go on to tell the story, the disciples, when Jesus gets arrested, they have the Last Supper. They go out to pray. Judas betrays Jesus. They come and arrest him. They scatter. It's not exactly the greatest moment for them. But we do have account of John being there when Jesus is crucified. Imagine, remembrance. Can you see yourself standing next to John? You're standing there seeing Jesus on the cross. Jesus is fainting. You can tell his life is leaving. Can you imagine him looking down? Again, making eye contact with you. With you. And saying, this is for you. This is for you. I'm here on this cross because I love you this much. Remember. Remember. Well, the great news is, right? Jesus doesn't stay on that cross. He doesn't stay dead. He has the resurrection. And then I love the scene of Jesus, and he's on the beach. He's cooking breakfast. The disciples are out fishing, and again, having a lousy experience of it. And Jesus helps them catch some fish, and then they're like, oh, it's Jesus. And what I love is when they come in, Jesus already has fish cooking up for them. And he's having this great conversation. He's looking at Peter and, Peter, let's get reconciled here. I know you're feeling some damage in this relationship. I want to fix that. I want to heal that. Remembrance. Man, how many times could Jesus be having that conversation with you, with me? Hey, I know there's some hurt here. I know there's some guilt here. I want to take care of that for you. And so when we're taking communion today, I want us to pause and maybe do this in a different way, experience it in a new way, to where we don't just rush through. Right? I mean, it's pretty easy, right? I mean, I've got my elements here. I mean, let's be honest. The little wafer that's in here, it's like, this is as biblical as it gets because it feels like Jesus could break this bread, right, instead of tearing it, right? There's nothing special about that little wafer or this juice, except when we put it in light of what we want to experience. Except when all of a sudden now it becomes communion, when it becomes remembrance. And as we remember, here's the thing. How tight-knit would those disciples have been? Experiencing everything they experienced with Jesus, including his death and his resurrection. How tight-knit of a group must that have been? We're his disciples too. How tight-knit are we? Well, they're tight-knit because, boy, they had something to focus on. They had Jesus. Well, so do we. And so as we take communion today, I want us to kind of prepare of not just quick eat the wafer and drink the juice, check that religious duty off our list. But I want us to take some time to be in remembrance. And as we take this, we allow ourselves to think back to the basics. Jesus, I want to focus on you and you alone. It's almost like a rededication moment for us. Of God, I have my own ideas, I have my own plans, I have my own thoughts. But I'm doing this in remembrance of you, of what you did, of who you are, and who I am. And God, help me to be faithful. And God, help me to see everyone else here as fellow disciples, as brothers and sisters. And God, let us, as we take communion, develop true community and focus on you. Surrender ourselves. And God, help us to fulfill your purpose for us individually and as a group and as a church. So I guess what I'm saying today is I want this communion to mean a few things. One, if you're a believer of Christ, then yes, take communion. If not, if you're not a follower, I would encourage and ask that you respectfully not participate in this. Because this is something that Jesus has set aside for those who are believers. Now, if you haven't made that commitment, but you want to, fantastic. Then in taking communion, that can be your commitment of saying, I want to be a disciple. I want to be a follower of Jesus Christ. And I realize the need for that. But not only are we doing this as followers because Jesus has said, do this, but we're doing this in truly saying, okay, God, I'm kind of recommitting, I'm kind of resetting, I'm refocusing, I'm getting back to the basics, and I want to focus on you. I want to lose the distractions. And God, I want you in my life, and I want you to be the focus of my life. I remember at one church I used to pastor at, back before COVID, people would come up and receive the elements. And we would have the cups of juice, and then we had just flat bread that was torn into different pieces. And I was sitting there holding the elements, and you'd see the kids come walking up. And they look up on the tray, and they're looking for the biggest piece, right? There's a nice big piece. And I thought, man, shouldn't we all be looking for as much Jesus as we possibly can get? It's a silly little illustration, but man, that's what I want in my life. I want that faith of a child of, I want as much Jesus as I can. And so in taking communion, Jesus, I surrender all of me, and I want to live for you. And as we take communion, God, I want to be in community with my fellow disciples here at Hillside Wesleyan as well. Let's get back to the basics. Let's focus on what is vitally important. And let's see what God does in this community through us and with us. So if you're planning on taking communion today, go ahead and you can get your elements and you can take out the wafer. And Jesus took the bread and he broke it, knowing. Think about this, folks. Simple loaf of bread, and Jesus takes it and he breaks it, knowing that in a few short hours, his body is literally going to be broken for us. The disciples had no idea what was taking place. But he breaks it, says, "Take and eat. This is my body broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And Jesus took the cup. And he totally changed things around again. And said, "This is my blood, shed for the forgiveness of sin." Picture it. You're at the table with Jesus. And he's looking directly in your eyes. And it's saying, "This is for your sin. This is for you that I'm going to do this." Yeah, it's global, but it's also very, very personal. I see you. I know you. And I love you. Take, drink, in remembrance of me. God, we just thank you for who you are. And it's so easy for us sometimes to just get caught up in the information of our faith, the history of our faith. But God, help us not to lose the moments. God, help us not lose the reality of what took place. And God, I just pray today that you would help us as individuals, small groups, as the church. God, help us to truly remember you and what you have done for us. God, help us to surrender to self and to honor and glorify you. And God, we thank you and we praise you for what you have done and what you're going to do. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.